Economics, Standard 11, Unit 2, Consumption Analysis continued. We have learnt ordinal analysis or an indifference approach, the importance of indifference curve, the schedule and the diagram in the previous class. Let us learn today an indifference map and properties of indifference curves. We can draw several indifference curves, each representing an indifference schedule. So, that is, we can just draw it in the horizontal line x-axis apple and in y-axis orange. And we can draw several indifference curves. So, I see one and second one, I see two, and the third one, I see 3. So we can draw several indifference curves in accordance with the indifference schedule. So what is an indifference map? Indifference map is a family or collection or set of indifference curves corresponding to different levels of satisfaction. So it's a family or collection or set of indifference curves corresponding to different levels of satisfaction. That's what we can see in this indifference map too. See, indifference curve 1, the lower level, gives less satisfaction comparing to indifference curve 3, the upper level. So, the upper level indifference curve 3 gives higher satisfaction when comparing to indifference curve 1, the lower level. So, indifference map is a family or collection of a set of indifference curves corresponding to different levels of satisfaction. Now, marginal rate of substitution, which was given by Leftwig. The shape of an indifference curve provides useful information about preferences. Indifference curve replaces the concept of marginal utility with the concept of the marginal rate of substitution. Indifference curve provides useful information about preferences. Indifference curve replaces the concept of marginal utility with the concept of the marginal rate of substitution. So, according to Leftwig, we can just say that the marginal rate of substitution of x for y, the marginal rate of substitution of x for y is defined as the maximum amount of y the consumer is willing to give up for getting an additional unit of x and still remaining on the same indifference curve. So, MRS XY is defined as the maximum amount of y the consumer is willing to give up for getting an additional unit of x and still remaining on the same indifference curve. Since y decreases as x increases, the change in y is negative. So, MRS XY is equal to change in y divided by change in x. With price elasticity of demand, the conversion is to ignore the minus sign. So, MRS XY equal to MRS XY is equal to change in y divided by change in x. So, this is what we call it as the marginal rate of substitution. The properties of an indifference curve can be easily learned with the help of diagrams. Of course, indifference curves are subjective and unique to each person. Nevertheless, they have in common the following properties. An indifference curve must have negative slope. First, indifference curve must have negative slope. So must have negative slope. This denotes that if the quantity of one commodity Y decreases, the quantity of the other X commodity must increase of the consumers to stay in the same level of satisfaction. So, an indifference curve must have negative slope, and even if an indifference curve is in the horizontal position A and B, and whether it is in the vertical position, so A and B, or in this position, so you can just see here A and B. Whether it is in the horizontal or vertical or in the slanting upward position, you don't find the basic characteristic of an indifference curve. See here A and B, and B and A and B. So in all these three diagrams, we find B curve is preferable to A. So B is actually clearly preferable to A. So these curves are not, they do not have negative slope. So an indifference curve must have negative slope. Secondly, an indifference curve is convex to its origin. Indifference curves are not only negatively sloped but also convex to the origin. It is implied that not only the two commodities are substitutes for each other, but also the fact that the MRS between the goods decreases as a consumer moves along on indifference curve. So you remember, that is, the MRS between the goods decreases as a consumer moves along an indifference curve. So secondly, indifference curves are convex to the origin. So convex to the origin. To the origin. Thirdly, indifference curves never intersect each other. So indifference curve cannot intersect each other. Cannot intersect each other. See in this diagram. So indifference curve 1. So I see 1. And if I just draw the indifference curve 2, then it just goes like this. So I see 2. So both I see 1 and I see 2 intersect each other at the point C. So here the lower IC1 is lower indifference curve, gives lesser satisfaction, whereas IC2 indifference curve 2, the upper one, gives higher satisfaction. So B and A. So here in IC1 indifference curve 1, lower lesser satisfaction, combination of C and B, that is fall on IC1 indifference curve 1. So combination of C and B. But whereas in indifference curve 2, higher satisfaction, upper level, and C, the combination of C and A fall on indifference curve 2. So from this diagram, we can easily understand that indifference curves never intersect each other. They cannot intersect each other. And fourthly, indifference curves do not touch the horizontal or vertical axis. They do not touch the horizontal or vertical axis. If they touch the axis, it violates the basic assumption. That is, this consumer purchases two commodities in a combination. So purchasing only one commodity means monomania. That is, consumer's lack of interest in the other commodity, or his insistence on purchasing only one commodity. So, the fourth important properties of indifference curve is indifference curves do not touch the horizontal or vertical axis. There are four important properties of indifference curves. An indifference curve must have negative slope. Secondly, indifference curves are convex to the origin. Third, indifference curves cannot intersect each other. They can never intersect each other. And fourthly, indifference curves cannot touch the horizontal or vertical axis. So that you can see it here. That is, the indifference curve cannot touch the horizontal or vertical axis. So now we have learnt the important properties of indifference curves with the help of diagrams. Thank you for listening.